The flood-hit regions of England become an election battleground as party leaders promise help. With some parts cut off for days, the government calls an emergency meeting. Opposition leaders criticise the response, while frustration grows for those affected.
Why visit now? You can visit other times when the times are good.
They just come to lay a sandbag and get a few photos taken and then disappear again.
There is now just a month to go until the election, and tonight I'm in St Andrews, at the very heart of the UK's most marginal constituency. Here and across Scotland, Brexit and independence are defining this campaign, and the results could be decided by just a few votes. Plus, how safe is vaping? The warning from doctors after a teenager's brush with death. And the extraordinary row in England's football camp, which led to Raheem Sterling being dropped.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale.
Good evening and welcome to St Andrews in Fife. For this, the first of our Evening News election specials from around the UK. Now, it is exactly a month until polling day, and this ancient Scottish university town lies at the heart of the most marginal seats in the United Kingdom. We're going to be hearing from people here about the issues that are likely to play big at the ballot box in Scotland. But the election agenda today is being dominated by a major domestic emergency, the floods in Yorkshire and the Midlands. Labour and the Liberal Democrats both went on the attack, Jeremy Corbyn slamming the government's response as woeful. The Emergency Cobra Committee did meet this afternoon, 5 days into the crisis. Ben Chapman reports from one flood-stricken community, Fishlake.
For days, the flooded village of Fishlake felt that help was slow to arrive. But while it's now the centre of political attention, parts of it remain a ghost town. Many of the houses abandoned, which is how many people have felt here. We're returning home with Nikki and Mark. They've been out since Friday, their house ruined, and they're sceptical about today's Cobra meeting and political visits.
It's taken 5 days now for it to get to the Cobra meeting. That should have been done immediately because it is an emergency. It's a mess. The whole village is an absolute mess.
Does it mean anything that they're all visiting now, the party leaders?
Why visit now? You can visit other times when the times are good.
They just come to lay a sandbag and get a few photos taken and then disappear again.
Water is now being pumped out of here and the level is dropping. This afternoon, the Prime Minister chaired a meeting of the government's emergency committee, Cobra, to discuss the situation.
We have to do absolutely everything we can to help the thousands of people who are affected, and so we're making sure that we have cash available for immediate support. Council's actually doing a very good job of providing immediate support.
The government denies the Cobra meeting was in response to Jeremy Corbyn's call for one. Today he visited the village of Bentley to see some of the damage.
Everything, as you can see, is
ruined, isn't it? All have to go.
He described the government's response as woeful and said a Labour government would create a £5.6 billion fund over 10 years to correct what he says is a regional imbalance in flood defences.
If you're in an area that's at risk of flooding, if you own the property, you can't sell it. If you live in it, you can't insure it. If it's been badly damaged, you can't afford to repair it. We cannot leave people living in this awful sense of fear and limbo.
Nearby, the Liberal Democrat leader Joe Swinson spent the morning meeting volunteers helping flood victims in Stainforth.
You're basically feeling like you've been left on your own and that the government hasn't been stepping up.
She says her party will put £5 billion in a 5-year flood prevention programme, but had to answer criticism that her party in coalition agreed to cuts in funding for defences.
I'm not going to defend everything that we did in coalition. I don't think we got everything right, but I think it is about learning from that, and also this additional £5 billion will be a very significant sum to invest in protecting people's homes, their businesses.
Tonight by the River Don, the Environment Agency continues to prepare this area for the potential of more heavy rain later this week. Meanwhile, a truck carrying donations from a local prison was unloaded at the relief centre, a community response which people here say has far exceeded that of official bodies. The scale of the community response is staggering. This hall is full of water, food, clothing, cleaning equipment, all donated, all to be shipped out of here to those who need it in volunteers' own cars. But there is a feeling here that they could have done with some more official support. The local council was here today offering advice, but there's a sense that it is too little too late. And the emergence of flooding as a campaign issue today is seen here as pure political opportunism.
Ben Chapman in South Yorkshire, thank you. Well, away from the floods, Labour was targeted by hackers today in 2 cyber attacks on the party's online digital platforms. Jeremy Corbyn warned it could be a worrying sign of things to come during the election campaign. And Rupert Evelyn is in Westminster for us now. So Rupert, what can you tell us about this?
Well, the Labour Party have had 2 separate attacks. They're what are known as a denial of distribution service. Now, that's complicated, but in essence what it means is absolutely flooding the Labour Party servers with traffic and therefore slowing them down. And that's, of course, is very complicated for them at the moment, right at the point at which they're hoping that their servers and their service is being used a lot. Now, we know from the National Cyber Security Centre that this attack was unsuccessful. We also know that despite the fact that a lot of the traffic came from foreign countries, it doesn't appear to have been instigated by a foreign country itself. That, of course, raises the question about who did it. Well, frankly, right now, we don't know. It wasn't terribly sophisticated. It is something that could be done by somebody with arguably a little knowledge. But what this really does is serve a warning, not just to the Labour Party, but to all the parties, that they are coming under scrutiny and need to defend themselves.
Rupert Evelyn, thank you. Well, let's switch the election focus now to where I am in St Andrews this evening. Here and across Scotland, the election battleground is likely to be defined not only by Brexit, but also significantly by Scottish independence. Nicola Sturgeon is flying the flag, of course, for that, while the traditional Westminster parties fight against her. And our Scotland correspondent Peter Smith heard from each of the Scottish leaders.
The Brexit debate doesn't cut through Scotland the way it does in England. Here, the real political divide is whether to stay in or leave the UK. For Nicola Sturgeon, this election is a kind of referendum on having a referendum.
Look at that crowd.
People know a vote for the SNP is, in your words, an endorsement for IndyRef2. I'm just curious, how do they express their will if they don't want another referendum?
In this election, which is probably the most important election in our lifetimes, it is quite literally about the future path our country takes. If we go down one direction, we've got Boris Johnson with his strings pulled by Nigel Farage deciding our future for us. The alternative, through a vote for the SNP, is to take Scotland's future into our own hands.
Nicola Sturgeon might just be the most selfied politician in Britain, but she's indisputably the recognised leader of Scotland's independence movement. Scotland's unionists, on the other hand, are still searching for their champion. In the last election, Ruth Davidson led the charge, but she's now resigned, and those who would inherit her throne are struggling with something of an image problem. In this Glasgow Hairdressers, we put it to the test. You know Ruth Davidson?
Yes.
Do you know that guy?
No.
Richard Leonard?
Nope.
Doesn't ring a bell?
Nope.
That's Willie Rennie, leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Right.
Do you know who he is now?
Nope.
What about...
Aye, well, everybody knows her face, don't they?
Well, that's Nicola Sturgeon.
You know Nicola Sturgeon?
Yeah.
Do you know what she stands for?
Independence?
What about the others?
I don't have a clue.
For those who might not know the face, Jackson Carlaw is Ruth Davidson's successor in the Scottish Tories.
As a lady who's not going to be voting for independence, that's the key thing.
But there's noticeably not a lot of Boris Johnson or Get Brexit Done on the Tory leaflets here. How does Boris Johnson go down on the doorsteps?
There are different views on different doorsteps, but it's not the principal thing that people talk about. People genuinely are saying, look, we want to stop this whole constitutional division. We don't want another independence referendum.
Scotland is Labour land no more.
No voting with on it. Okay. Aye.
They're now battling to make themselves the party of the union here, in spite of mixed messages from the UK Labour Party.
There will be no deals with the SNP, there will be no pacts with the SNP, and there will be no coalition with the SNP. So,
even if they could put Jeremy Corbyn into Downing Street in exchange for IndyRef2, the answer would be no. Scottish Lib Dems are against an independence referendum, but are accused of hypocrisy given they support a second referendum on Brexit.
We've had enough of the constitutional division, we've had enough of the economic damage to the country, and we've had enough of the division between families and neighbours and communities. Let's bring it to an end, let's stop Brexit and stop independence.
In Scotland, this isn't an election about Brexit, but it is a test ground for another constitutional battle that's still to come.
And Peter is with me now. So Peter, across Scotland there are so many really closely fought seats, aren't there? What do you see as being key to the outcome here?
Well, the situation in Scotland is absolutely fascinating because there are so many marginal seats. In a quarter of the seats here, the majority is just less than 1,000. The seat we're in right now in North East Fife, Mary, the difference last time round was just 2 votes, so it's on a knife edge while Scotland is chewing over these meaty constitutional issues. Brexit might not divide people in Scotland as it does in England, but the fact that every constituency in Scotland voted Remain, yet Scotland gets Brexit, has been the driving force behind independence being put back on the table. Of course, that plays right into the hands of Nicola Sturgeon. She's been waiting her whole political life for this moment, this opportunity. The big challenge, of course, is for Scotland's unionist parties. They have to rise to the challenge to prove themselves to be the best foil for Nicola Sturgeon, who is going to be the de facto leader of Scottish unionism. I think that it's fair to say that this election is a preliminary test of Scotland's resolve to stay in the United Kingdom.
Interesting stuff. Peter, thank you very much indeed. Still to come on the ITV Evening News, we'll hear from some of the voters around here, from the fishing port to the golf club. I will be asking what issues really matter to them. Plus the rest of the day's news, of course, including the row that's cost Raheem Sterling his England place. We'll be right back after the break. Don't go away. Hello and welcome back to St Andrews, where we're holding our first ITV Evening News election special. We're going to return to the campaign in just a moment, but first to some of the day's other news. A teenager who nearly died when he suffered a reaction to vaping is warning others not to take up the habit. It's Ewan Fisher's 19th birthday today, but his life almost ended at 16 when he was suddenly struck down by severe respiratory failure. Let's get more now from our health correspondent, Emily Morgan.
Ewan Fisher had been smoking e-cigarettes for 4 months. This is how it left him. Unable to breathe, he ended up in intensive care with serious respiratory failure.
Now you were unconscious at this?
Yeah, I was sedated.
So bad his condition, he was put into a coma to have oxygen pumped into his bloodstream.
I was really struggling, like I physically couldn't get any breath, so when I was on my ward I was begging to go onto intensive care so that I could get put on better machinery. I was saying to my mum, like, am I going to die?
Since then, a group of scientists, including one of Ewan's consultants, have confirmed a liquid in one of his vapes triggered an immune reaction. Professor Bush was one of them and warns people vape at their own peril.
I cannot look you in the eye and say they are safe, or they are 90% safer than something else, because we do not have those data. We do not know what's in them, so how can we say they're safe? We do not know their long-term effects, so how can we say they're safe?
7 years ago, just 700,000 UK adults used e-cigarettes, but that's now risen to 3.6 million. 54% of those are ex-smokers, and among young people, 15% reported having tried vaping. These numbers help to explain why the government still insists it's safer to vape than smoke.
It's a rare reaction that some people get for reasons we're not sure to inhaling a particular substance, but also something that most people can inhale and it doesn't cause the problem. Because, I mean, coming back to it, enormous numbers of people are vaping now and these cases are, extremely rare.
Ewan is sceptical. He gave up smoking to improve his boxing, but now he's experienced the very worst effects of vaping and wants everyone to know the personal risks. Emily Morgan, ITV News in Nottingham.
Look at other news now. An incestuous couple who murdered their 2 teenage sons by strangling them were each jailed for a minimum of 35 years today. Sarah Barras claims she and her half-brother, Brandon Machin, the father of all 6 of her children, killed the boys at her home in Sheffield rather than see them taken into care. Tristan and Blake Barras were 13 and 14 years old. There's been more unrest in Hong Kong today. Clashes broke out between protesters and police on several university campuses. after demonstrators disrupted the morning rush hour. And firefighters in Australia are trying to stop some of the country's worst ever bushfires from reaching the city of Sydney. Planes have been dropping fire retardant over some suburbs. And the former head of the British Army, Lord Bramwell, has died at the age of 95. The D-Day veteran's later years were blighted by false allegations that he was part of a VIP paedophile ring. And finally, back to our election coverage, and I'm here in St Andrews. Famously, of course, it's the home of golf, the historic clubhouse, just a short walk from where I'm standing. It's also at the heart of the UK's tightest marginal, won by just 2 votes in the last election. Throughout this campaign, as we travel the UK, I'll be finding out what the voters think about the big issues, as I did here on Scotland's East Coast. The constituency of North East Fife must be one of the UK's most picturesque. It's certainly its most marginal. In 2017, the SNP beat the Lib Dems here by just 2 votes. So this time there's everything to play for. But how do people here see this election? I came to Pittenweem, heart of this area's fishing community.
Boris is the only one that's going to make the country change. That's what we want. That's what I voted for, to leave. As for the SNP, I'm not going to go there.
Nicola Sturgeon, she's a bully. She thinks she's talking for all of Scotland all the time, and she's not.
I don't understand it. I don't know anything about it because it's just too confusing and it's gone on for so long.
From Pittenweem to Anstruther and the toddlers playgroup in the local church.
You know, all this talk about should Joe Swinson get to be in the leaders' debate, but no mention of the SNP who've got more MPs there. It's just like, hello, we're still here, you know.
It just seems to be a lot of people talking and stroking their own egos and making promises that they then go back on.
I am worried about, not me personally, but future generations. What's it going to be like for them?
At one of Fife's many golf clubs, there's little affection for MPs of whatever party.
Politicians, they're there just for themselves. They're not there for the country nowadays.
None of the MPs are doing what they were voted in for.
And I don't want the country split up. I don't want Scotland to be separate. I'm not into independence because I don't think it would work.
Would any of you vote for Scottish independence? No. None of you? Okay. In these uncertain times, political tides are difficult to navigate. In Fife, as elsewhere, opinion is divided. Dissatisfaction, it seems, is the one thing that unites everyone. Baby speaking for all of us there, I think. That's it from St Andrews. Tom Bradby will be in the studio with news at 10, but from me and all the team, have a very good evening. Bye-bye.